Somaliland ruling party candidate Musa Bihi Abdi is pronounced winner of last week's election to become the country's 5th president. And tonight we'll be talking about the growing call for civil disobedience across the continent. Of course, that last bit in our highlight is going to form the basis of our discussion tonight, but there's no way we're going to avoid developments in the south of the continent, and that is Zimbabwe. And that is why we're asking you on our Twitter poll tonight. Do you think Zimbabwe faces a more stable future after Robert Mugabe? Of course, Robert Mugabe has tendered his resignation today after 37 years in power. So we're asking you, do you believe Zimbabwe faces a more stable future after Robert Mugabe? You know the drill. Our Twitter handle is at KTN News. You can as well tweet me at Yusuf Ibra. Our hashtag is Bottomline Africa. I'm going to make sure I go through some of your feedback within the program. Now we begin with our top story tonight. After nearly a week of sustained pressure, Zimbabwe's president Robert Mugabe has finally resigned. Wild celebrations erupted across the country as soon as word went around that Mugabe has tendered his resignation through a letter to Parliament Speaker Jacob Mudenda. Now, a letter from Mugabe said that the decision was voluntary and that he had made it to allow a smooth transition of power. The surprise announcement halted an impeachment hearing that had begun against him. Lawmakers roared in celebration, jubilation, and people have begun celebrating in the streets already. Mugabe had previously refused to resign despite last week's military takeover and days of protest. The letter did not, however, mention who will take over from Mugabe. The constitution says it should be the current vice president, Felekezela Mfoko, a supporter of Mugabe's wife, Grace.
President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, in terms of the provisions of Section 96, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, Amendment number 20, 2013. Following my verbal communication with the Speaker of the National Assembly, Advocate Jacob Mudenda, at 13:53 hours, 21st November 2017, intimating my intention to resign as the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, I, Robert Mugabe, in terms of Section 96, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, hereby formally tender my resignation as the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe with immediate effect.
There you go, Uncle Bob, as Robert Mugabe is commonly referred to, is no more, at least, as a president. And now, just to tell me more on the political development there in the south of the continent is Albert Gumbo, a member of the opposition, is joining me via Skype all the way from South Africa. Albert, good evening. I'm sure celebrations still on in Harare and many other cities in Zimbabwe. And according to Zimbabwe's constitution, the deputy or the vice president, that is Felekezela Mfoko, is supposed to take over. Will that necessarily be the case?
Thank you very much for having me and good evening. I want to make two things very clear. The first thing is this is a fantastic moment for Zimbabwe and for the continent because we are showing the people that a dictator is not, and a dictatorship is not sustainable, and that the people will always rise up, stand up against a dictatorship. So this is very important for our people to understand. But the second point I want to make, which is even more important, is that the comment you made about sustained pressure is not exactly accurate. This is not the result of sustained pressure on Robert Mugabe. It is the result of a choreographed maneuver by the military in Zimbabwe to prop up the Mugabe regime.
Your constitution says Felekezela Mfoko, the current vice president, is supposed to take over. And this is a person who has, a huge support or has been supporting Mugabe's wife, Grace, who is a very unpopular figure in Zimbabwe at the moment. So is that necessarily going to be the case?
No. Grace is extremely unpopular. That is very true. so is Limpopo. But what has happened is that there's a falling out between friends, between erstwhile comrades who are falling out, and in the name of democracy, which is exactly completely untrue, they are working to make sure that the masses endorse what they are doing in terms of a power struggle for the regime.
Yes, now, Albert, as a member of the opposition, reports are going around that, the fired Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa might take power during this transition period. Does that worry you as a member of the opposition?
No, it doesn't worry us because Mnangagwa has never won an election in a constituency, and therefore we're very happy that he's the candidate because we know that we can easily defeat him. What we must understand is that Mnangagwa is part of the system that propped up the Mugabe regime for a very long time when our people were oppressed.
And we all know elections in Zimbabwe, most of the time Mugabe has been accused of stealing election, and one man has been at the center of all this controversy, and that is Mnangagwa. So once again, as a member of the opposition, you've already said it doesn't worry you, but there are those who are saying that, perhaps he might take power and we might just see another Mugabe in power.
We have no problem with him taking power because the Constitution demands it. But come August 2018, we would like to see a situation where we have taken power away from him, but this time in a constitutional manner that is not choreographed, that is based on the ballot box, and that is based on the free vote and the free will of the Zimbabwean people.
Albert, let's talk about the ruling party, that is ZANU-PF, a much dreaded political party. And analysts are saying this is not some sort of a renewal in ZANU-PF, it's just a snake shedding its old skin. So with the exit of Mugabe, what does that mean for ZANU-PF as a political party? Does it have future?
It means that ZANU-PF has a chance to regroup while the euphoria of the crowd of the departure of Robert Mugabe clouds the judgment of the Zimbabwean people. And what we are calling upon on the Zimbabwean people is the ability to reflect, to evaluate, to discern, and to measure the response that they must choose. So we are very clear in our mind. This is a fight between comrades. It has nothing to do with the Zimbabwean people. And what we want to do is make sure that when the snake sheds its skin, that the Zimbabwean people can still recognize it for what it is. And we don't like to use language like that. So we want to say ZANU-PF is still ZANU-PF, and our people must remain focused on making sure that we work towards a complete democratization of the Zimbabwean space and to make sure that our people.
So Albert, you believe that the opposition stand a chance once Zimbabwe heads to election next year, perhaps?
Of course. Our people are resilient. They are hardworking. They know what they have lost in the past. They know about the lost decades of the economy, lost decades of human capital, and they're going to work to make sure that we restore that legacy to Zimbabwe and that we bring back a Zimbabwe that's prosperous and sustainably prosperous. So,
one final question, Albert. The former president, let me call him, that is Robert Mugabe, once said that only God can remove him from power. That was the level of defiance then. What exactly changed in Zimbabwe up to the moment, military also came in?
Well, I don't know which God he worships, but whichever God he worships has let him down because the will of the people is far, far greater than his thinking and his delusion in his mind, because when people are granted with power, they believe they have divine rights to rule.
Thank you very much, Albert, for your input. That is Albert Gumbo, a member of the opposition, talking to me via Skype all the way from South Africa. At a time when Zimbabweans are still celebrating after that news broke, that Robert Mugabe has submitted his resignation after, close to 4 decades in power, to be specific, 37 years. And still, on this story, let's now take a look at the life history of Robert Mugabe as told by an old friend of the Iron Leader, journalist Wilf Mbanga, who narrated his story to the BBC. Let's watch that story.
was an Africa correspondent with the Argus Africa News Service. I spent a lot of my time in Rhodesia covering the political story. I got to know a lot of the black nationalist leaders, including Robert Mugabe, who then became a very good friend.
This country is in a state of shock tonight. Rhodesians were prepared when they woke up this morning to hear that Robert Mugabe had won the most seats.
All over the country, they huddled in groups listening to the radio, and when the official announcement was finally made, they went wild. Throughout the day, they've been singing and dancing.
I was with him when the results of the 1980 elections were announced. And he jumped up and said, yes, now, he was excited and we were all excited, we were hugging.
Well, I think I had heard the news earlier, and so my heart went bang, bang, bang. It was with joy.
Growing up in Rhodesia, where there was racial discrimination, all that was going to be behind us. I was now, a first-class citizen in my own country. He's still regarded as the father figure, as a revolutionary who brought about an end to the Rhodesian oppressive system. He was different from all the other politicians. He was a true Democrat.
I wish to assure you that there can never be any return to the state of armed conflict which existed before our commitment to peace.
He used to come and visit me at my house. We used to listen to music. We listened to Jim Reeves. And sometimes we sang along.
From a jack to a king. With no regrets, I stacked the cards last night. And Lady Luck played.
And, I was really close. I was part of the inner group. But then I started questioning, what I was being told.
Government troops have been accused of indiscriminate murders in their search for dissidents opposed to Mr. Mugabe's government.
In some places, local people have managed to bury their own dead. The death toll could reach 1,000 or more. We'll probably never know for sure because the government denies the atrocities.
I would tell him what was, what I knew, what I'd heard, and he would come back with, his side of the story. He's such an articulate person. He's such an intelligent person, and to imagine him as a thug, I really could not get that, into my head. Did I want to remain part of this system? It took a while for me to make up my mind to leave my job and set up an independent daily, which then published the Daily News.
It's the reporting of the role of the police that's led to the arrest of 4 journalists, including the editor from the Daily News, an independent newspaper.
I was being harassed. My telephone was bugged. I was followed everywhere I went. After you've had, developed a relationship with a person and you regard him as a friend, it does hurt. I'm glad we had the relationship. I'm glad I got to know him well at a time when he really cared about the country, when he really cared about the people.
And still on that developing story in Zimbabwe, I'm now joined on via phone link by Conrad Monawashe, a journalist based in Harare, that is Zimbabwe's capital. Conrad, good evening. We've seen all this evening for the last 3 or 4 hours, Zimbabweans, going to the streets, celebrating, rejoicing after Mugabe resigned as a president. How is the situation like on the ground at this hour?
Good evening. The situation is still quite electric because Zimbabweans have not known how to change a president since Mugabe became the leader, starting with the time he was prime minister in 1980, and a few years later he became executive president of the country. And this is the first time that Zimbabweans have had to change the head. And the feeling is just like somebody is still dreaming. And I've been speaking to quite a number of people on the streets
since the announcement that he had tendered his resignation in terms of Section 96 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. And the people were saying that some of them are actually saying, I do not want to wake up from this dream because it has never happened. Imagine somebody who was born 37 years ago and has not known any other leader except the President Robert Mugabe, the former president actually of Zimbabwe, we can say.
Yes,
so it's something that has never happened in our lifetime, and everybody else here on the street is quite happy that it has come in their lifetime, that at least leaders can be changed. And it's a lesson for probably become the leaders who are going to be coming in and many other African states.
Yes.
You will be changed at some point.
Yes, Conrad, thanks for painting us a rough picture of what is happening in Harare at this moment. And speaking about your constitution, you've already mentioned something to do with your constitution. It says clearly that when a president resigns, then the vice president is going to take over. And this vice president now is a very unpopular figure in Zimbabwe. How will that go down with the people?
The ruling party has made a provision already at its special Central Committee meeting, which is the organ that makes the rules outside Congress. So we set on Sunday. So they elected and appointed Emerson Mnangagwa, the former vice president. They reinstated him into the party as the second secretary because on Sunday, before the resignation of Mr. Mugabe, Mr. Mugabe was the first secretary. The president becomes the first secretary of the party, and the vice president becomes the second secretary. So the party reinstated Emerson Mnangagwa as the second secretary of the party. And after reinstating him, they then appointed him as the leader of the party, taking over from President Robert Mugabe. So we expect that in the next the Constitution says that the Speaker of Parliament, or you will make an announcement within the next 48 hours, because the ruling ZANU-PF is expected to then submit its nomination for the candidate to take over as interim president until the election. So we expect that ZANU-PF probably could have done that late into the night, or will do that early in the morning. But we understand that from the ground they want to fast-track the move so that there is no power vacuum in the country. And the moment that he is appointed through Parliament, then it triggers the process of swearing in.
It seems quite a process. And I've talked to several members of the opposition, and the common word they refer to the current situation, as much as they're celebrating, they're saying they're cautiously optimistic. Why do you think that is the case?
Well, it's when you have gone for 37 years in a country where it's supposed to be one of the prosperous nations in Africa or on earth, given what we possess in terms of agricultural capacity and in terms of the minerals that we have here. And again, as the jewel probably of Africa, and a country that was once a breadbasket, and you have not really realized that in the past 20 or so years. And there's bound to be acrimony between the ruling party and other opposition groups, churches and many other groups as stakeholders in the country. So because of that acrimony, spanning over a lot of many years, where there was a kind of arbitrary arrest of opposition members, and elections were not going according to plan, according to what everybody else expected, and those problems caused a big rift between people from different parties, especially the opposition versus the ruling party. So there's an element of distrust. So they were celebrating, and they were prepared to vote in the impeachment together with ZANU-PF, simply because they were taking their position to say, at least let's get this stage, let's get done away with this stage of getting Robert Mugabe out, who has been an Iron Man. When we get him out, then we'll see what will come in the next. So they are hopeful that probably ZANU-PF will extend an invitation for talks for an inclusive government or national transitional authority, which some of the opposition figures have been pushing for. So they are expecting that, probably because they have shown that they want to work for the development and the positives in Zimbabwe. They expect ZANU-PF to either reciprocate in the same manner and invite them for talks so that they can come up together with the National Transitional Authority or National Transitional Council. So that will lead the country into the election.
Now, Conrad, one final question. At least we know Robert Mugabe has tendered his resignation. He ceases to be Zimbabwe's president. But many people are asking the whereabouts of Grace Mugabe. Does anyone know where she is?
Well, there's been quite a number of the different versions in the country because she has not been seen in public over the couple of past 2 weeks or so since this action by the military started. It's been 2 weeks now, so because she has not been seen in public, there's bound to be quite a number of versions. The other one was saying she's already out of the country. The other one was saying she's still in the country. But we believe that she's still in the country because we have not been officially advised that she's out of the country. So it's anyone's guess. But probably when we go for tomorrow, as we prepare for the swearing-in ceremony for the interim leader, we will probably get to know and get information about her whereabouts, because we understand that the resignation came together with full immunity. This is something that we still have to confirm.
Yes,
we understand that the first family, former first family, has been granted full immunity in the talks ahead of the resignation. So probably if that has been granted, then we are bound to see her in public in the next couple of hours, starting from tomorrow.
Yes, Conrad, and I'm sure all Zimbabweans are keen on the future of their country. There are many things. Conrad Mwanawashe is a journalist talking to me all the way from Harare, Zimbabwe, where he's telling me the atmosphere is still very much electric after Robert Mugabe tendered his resignation as the president of Zimbabwe after serving close to 4 decades in power. And tonight, our discussion, of course, is about civil disobedience. We've seen some sort of civil disobedience there in Zimbabwe. It happened in northern part of Africa, Togo, as well as Kenya in a way. And I'm going to discuss this with our guest in studio. They're there on the screen. We have Suba Churchill, a civil society reference group presiding convener. We also have Gasheke Gishihi. He's a human rights defender and member of Bunge la Mwananchi. We also have Enoch Makanga, who's the chairman of Protective and Safety Association of Kenya, that is PROSEC. He's going to tell us more on the security situation, not just in Kenya, but all across the African countries that is at this moment experiencing some sort of civil disobedience. All that and much more within this program. This is your favorite Pan-African show, Bottomline Africa. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim, of course. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.